views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Welcome to Bronx Talk. Tonight's guest is Bronx Borough President Ruben Diaz Jr. On Thursday of last week, the Borough President delivered his sixth State of the Borough address since becoming the borough's Chief Executive Officer. In that speech that was delivered at the new Bay Plaza Mall in Co-op City, the Borough President celebrated a rise in employment, a host of development projects, and new housing. He also had interesting proposals to do things like cover over rail yards and build a new film studio. We will ask him tonight about all those projects and more as he makes his record-setting 24th appearance on Bronx Talk, more than anyone else has been on the show in our 20 years. Because he takes calls on News 12, traditionally we do not take calls when he appears here on this program. If you want to talk to him on TV, you catch his appearances on News 12. But you can email questions or comments to us at BronxTalk@BronxNet.org or post them on our Facebook page. We read them on the air during a future edition of our program, and if necessary, we will forward them to the Borough President and get you an answer. So, for the 24th time, please join me in welcoming back to the program the Borough President of the Bronx, Ruben Diaz Jr.
Always a pleasure to be back. A little trivia here.
Here we go.
February 15th was the 19th anniversary of the first time I ran for the New York State Assembly.
Okay.
And as a candidate in that special election, as a 22-year-old, the first interview that I did was with you on this show.
Right.
So we've done 24 appearances, the first one being about 19 years ago.
Exactly. So more than 1 year. And actually, since you've been, just for the record, since you've been Borough President, you've come here almost, I think, unfailingly at least twice a year, which I know you're busy, but to your credit, we certainly appreciate it. And as everybody knows, I never let up. We're going to just come right at you. So, State of the Borough speech, I thought you were very buoyant. You certainly had a lot to be excited about. As we have just documented, I've covered your career as an elected official for many years, and I sat back and I said, so here's an elected official who made his way, who made a big name for himself in the city by making sure a mall was not built at the Kingsbridge Armory, and here he is delivering a triumphant State of the Borough speech at a mall in Co-op City. Transformation, change of heart, change of mind, new ideas. Explain to me how we went from one to the other.
Because it was never about being against a mall. For us, Gary, it's always been about planning with purpose. And when you look at the Kingsbridge Armory, the mall there would have taken away from one of the largest shopping strips in New York City, which is Fordham Road, only one train station away. So it was never really about that. It was about hurting the jobs at Fordham Row. It was also about how we were being treated by the city and the developer in the Kingsbridge Armory. On this side, we know that a mall is something that was a good fit in Bay Plaza. When you look at the fact that the developer there did not ask us for a nickel. So, even though we always making sure that people get paid better wages, unlike the Kingsbridge unlike the Kingsbridge Armory, they didn't ask us for a nickel there, and yet we were able to create over about 2,000 jobs. I think it goes a long way in rebranding our borough, and I thought that a lot of folks needed to see the mall. What was amazing to me is how many Bronxites, after speaking about the new mall for so much, this was their first time being at the mall, and hopefully those individuals will keep coming back. Bronxites, as I said in my speech, have embraced the mall in tremendous fashion, and we know that with this spending that's going on in the mall, it's good for job growth, it's good for the Bronx, and it was good to have it there.
Well, what long-term results do you expect out of the malls? There's the one in Bay Plaza, the two on Broadway in the North Bronx, one in the East Bronx, the Target Mall. I'm sure I'm missing some because it certainly has been the trend and one of the things that you're most proud of. How will these ultimately change the borough? 5 years from now, 10 years from now, people will look back and say, oh, the malls did what?
We don't have to wait for that long. What the malls have already done is given the Bronx a reputation as a place that has the same type of amenities that other boroughs and other counties have. It has certainly created jobs. No one can deny that. It has provided for Bronxites a better shopping experience. You know, we did a survey 2011, and many Bronxites were displeased and dissatisfied with the options, the shopping options that they had locally, and we were losing many of those dollars to cross county. We were losing them to White Plains and even other boroughs at Queens Mall. So what we've already seen that these malls have done is provided for job creation, is provided for people to look at the Bronx differently, and it's a place now where people can go with their families and make great family experiences and memories.
So the number of jobs, I mean, we can talk about the nature of retail jobs, but the ownership certainly is not there. And let me give you a little counterpoint to what you were saying about, let's say, a mall at the Kingsbridge Armory would have competed, let's say, with Kingsbridge and Fordham Road. Businesses between White Plains Road and Rosedale, called Salsa Row, you're very familiar, I'm sure, are forming a merchants association because what the Daily News said, the shop owners hope that by bonding together, their mom and pops can withstand the borough's recent onslaught of malls and corporate chains. There's no doubt that they claim that the malls have made it tougher and tougher for them to survive. So in a way, even though you champion the malls here, isn't it still competing with so-called Main Street in so many of our Bronx communities?
Obviously, there's always competition in business, but when you look at Salsa Row, they have wonderful restaurants there. I don't think that it's the mall that they're competing against. I think that they're competing with the fact that they may not have parking. We need to solve those issues. Whether the mall was built or not, those issues for them would have been there. The type of cuisine that they have to offer are different from what you have in the mall. So I don't think there's really, it's mixing apples and oranges. And when you go to Tosca's, when you go to Spodo's, when you go to Havana's Cafe, Havana's restaurant, these are all Cabo. These are all different types of venues in terms of cuisine than you find at the mall. So I think that there's certainly a clientele, or there's certain customers that will go to both. The question becomes, how is it that we can help those businesses? And I'm totally am supportive of the businesses there, frequent them with my family all the time. And if they want to get into a bid, I would certainly be helpful with that as well. This is the reason why, for instance, the Trump Golf Course, having the PGA Golf Classic that's coming in 2017, the Barclays PGA Golf Classic, I think helps that strip there. We need to continue to build malls where we can build them, but also help our local businesses. That's what the BOEDC is for, the Bronx Over Economic Development Corporation. We've been working with Stephen Kaufman with the Merchants Association in Throgs Neck, who's also the chair of the BOEDC. So I think that there's room enough for growth for everyone.
I'm going to give you a story, and I know you know this story very well. Garden Gourmet on Broadway in it's about 234th Street, across the street from the Staples. Started out as really a very small little grocery and did really everything you should do. They had fresh foods. They had a great product. They've hired, I don't know the numbers, but certainly they're providing jobs.
Great establishment.
I'm sure you've shopped there.
Absolutely.
And so here they are, and then just now south of them, they have a mall that has an Aldi's in it, and now just north of them, they have a mall that is going to have a BJ's. It's probably going to open just about any day now.
BJ's, you can't compare BJ's, or a person who's going to shop at BJ's for bulk to what's happening at a grocery at the Gourmet Guru.
The point is,
what I'm saying is that whole strip, and we've been working with elected officials.
That is something you said during the State of the Borough, right?
So I think that you're going to have some folks who will go to the I do that. I go to the Gourmet.
Garden Gourmet,
and then go to BJ's, and you get bulk at BJ's, and then you go get some fresh produce here. So I think that both businesses and both establishments will benefit from the traffic that wasn't there before either one of the establishments were there.
Very recently, maybe a week and a half ago, there was a ribbon cut at CUNY at the concourse for small business development. There was, I think, one of the council members provided a $5 million grant, and they're trying to support local businesses. What is the message to people, entrepreneurs who are not ready to buy a chain like a Foot Locker or something, but just want to open a store and feed their families and do well in the Bronx? Is there a place for them, especially in light of what's going on with the big businesses and the malls and things like that?
Absolutely. In fact, the largest employer in the aside from the health industry are small businesses. And what I would tell them is to come to us, come to the Bronx Over Economic Development Corporation. Look, over the last 12 months, we've been able to lend out, whether in grants or small interest loans, or even larger loans, more than $90 million with our BIC initiative under the umbrella of the BOEDC. So we've been tremendously helpful to small businesses. We'll continue to do that. We know that that's the lifeblood of our local economy. Obviously, in a capitalist society, there's competition. And, these are businesses that have to compete depending on the services, depending on the quality of product that they're putting out. But certainly my job as the borough president, working with Marlene Cintrón and the BOEDC and other chambers of commerce, we're going to always be there in supporting our small businesses. And we don't just do that with speech and with rhetoric. We do that by allocating real dollars, almost to the tune of $100 million in the last 12 months alone.
I think many communities, and you know where I sit, and I talk to everybody in the Bronx and many different organizations and people come through here. The sense that I'm getting right now is that people are concerned about self-determination, that a neighborhood, regardless of what the vision is, whether it's similar to your vision or similar to somebody else's vision, but they feel like they're not able to say, this is what we want in our community. An example was something you brought up at the State of the Borough was Cromwell Jerome. This is clearly going to be a new vision for a new neighborhood. Who's going to make the determination of what happens over there? Because already there's resentment over the Department of City Planning. They came through there and there was all kinds of, you probably read about it in the news. So who's going to make the determination?
All of us. I mean, the people make that, the people make that argument with the Kingsbridge National Ice Center. No one could deny that there was a lot of conversation with the community, over 27 groups. They came up with the CBA for that. No one can deny that the community wasn't involved with the Donald Trump golf course for over many, many years. People certainly had a say as to how the mall was built and who they hired. So when it comes to Jerome Cromwell, that's still a study, it's still a conversation. And in fact, one of the things that we're seeing with the city of New York and the mayor is when they want to put out this ULURP process and have this mandatory inclusionary housing. So they identify 6 different neighborhoods throughout the city. What we don't want a contextual ULURP process where you have one vote on the ULURP for 6 different neighborhoods in the city of New York. Why? Because we want to hold and reserve our ability to shape what Cromwell Jerome and other communities will look like and what goes there. One thing that people have to understand, though, and I get where you're going here, is that the times change. And the Bronx, there are areas that have to change. When you look at Jerome and you look at that corridor on Jerome Avenue underneath the train station has looked that way, Gary, since I was a teenager.
Since we were both younger and I'm older than you are.
And then there are people who still want it to look like it did in the 80s and in the 90s. And guess what? Some people fight when there's change, and then some people say, well, why is Brooklyn getting everything? Why is Queens getting everything? When is the Bronx going to get something? So, you just got to make the determination, and I think that as we move forward, you're going to see a lot of community input, but things are going to change, and we always welcome input so that as that change comes along, like we've done in other areas, everyone has a say and everyone is a stakeholder.
Here's a loaded question based on what I already said. So I'm going to ask you what you want to see there. Of course, the comeback is I want to see what the people want to see. But do you have a preconception of how you'd like that to look?
Obviously, there's got to be some density in housing. When you look at the mayor's plan for 200,000 units of affordable housing, 40% of that would be new housing. Certainly, we have to take a look at that. I would like to see some commercial. We already did the new school across the street with some organizations over there. Mm-hmm. So there's got to be housing and some type of commercial strip just to beautify.
I'm going to weigh in with my own vision.
Sure.
I'd love to see.
What would you like to see?
I'd love to see an old-style neighborhood with ethnic restaurants that attract people because it's not far from Yankee Stadium. So after the game, people would say, "Wow, what a great place to go after the game and get."
Say that again. Ethnic restaurant with what?
Ethnic restaurants.
Right. Okay, say it again. Say it again.
I don't know what I did.
No, I'm interviewing you.
Oh.
No, the reason why I say that is because when you afford those options to folks, those are the same folks who say, well, wait a minute. You know, if you do ethnic restaurants, depending on what type of restaurants, depending on how you put them, now you're talking about gentrification, right?
This is why you're the borough president and I'm just a loudmouth talk show. Let's talk about...
I wouldn't mind seeing some of that as well. The thing is...
So a real old-style Bronx neighborhood,
right,
I'd love to see it.
Depending on what kind of restaurants go there, what type of cuisine. If you're looking at some of the restaurants that, for instance, you see in places like Soho or in Chelsea, or if you see in Long Island City, people may say, wait a minute, that's not really our folks. That, you know, there's gentrification going on. So you always got to be careful about, wanting, what you want there. And ultimately, going back to what you said, we're going to make sure the community has an input.
Let's talk about the new film studio. It is York Studios.
Yes.
And they have made an offer, or they have already bought the property. Tell people what this vision is of a film studio.
So if you look at Story Avenue and Bronx River Avenue, there's a site.
An area you know very well.
I live a block away from it.
I know that.
It's called the Loral site. Do you remember the Loral site? Mm-hmm. It was a site for so many years. It's laid dormant. It's right on the waterfront over by the Bronx River. It's right across the street from the Lafayette, Boynton, Lafayette, Morrison Estates. And this is land that was contaminated for so many years. Finally, we've been able to have the York Studios come in. They're looking at 300,000 square foot, 8 stages. This is the same studio that responsible for filming things like Godzilla, right? And so could you imagine now the job creation, not only that, but to have movie stars that will come in that area of the Bronx, what it would mean for local businesses. And certainly the fact that they're going to come in and clean up that contaminated area and also open up the waterfront to the public.
Wow.
I think that,
what I like in the dialogue about jobs and in the dialogue of, well, can we build the Bronx with retail jobs? This is a multi-tiered strata of jobs, and with what we both know is a vibrant arts community in the Bronx. I could see with all of our artists and musicians and designers getting work over there, and that would be fantastic.
Not only that, I think that when you get film studios here, and this is something that I've been fighting for since I've been the borough president, we just couldn't find the right location. As they film in the Bronx, and as you get more and more people from outside of the borough, from Hollywood, actors, you get sort of that spotlight on our borough so that the world can see something different than what they were accustomed to seeing in the 80s and the 90s. You know, it was Hollywood who really did us in and has left this long-term stain in the mind of the world that the Bronx is this place where it's dilapidated, where it's run down and crime-ridden. And so that's not really the case anymore. And we're hoping with these film studios we could tell the new story of the new Bronx.
It'd be nice to see an Academy Award-winning film, and at the bottom of the credits is filmed in the Bronx, New York.
That would be great.
You talked about covering over rail yards, and if I remember the history of the city correctly, that we had a proposal to build West Side Stadium over rail yards down on the west side of Manhattan. But one of the main things that stopped it was going to cost $700 million to cover over those rail yards, and that made any project, just regardless of whether it was a stadium or housing, not worthwhile. Are we going to be able to realistically cover over the rail yards and still have money to put up housing?
I couldn't give you a guarantee, and I would hope so. Certainly is worth trying. So the reason this came about is not only the decking over the West Side rail yards, but just recently the mayor put out in his State of the City address that he would like to do this in Sunnyside, Queens. And I saw that the local elected leaders, speaking with my colleague, Borough President Melinda Katz, and the state of New York, they're not that interested in having this decking over in Sunnyside. Now, for us, I've identified in my speech 3 different locations. And what I'm saying is if the city is now prepared to invest hundreds of millions of dollars in decking, if we are looking to create density in housing in the Bronx and throughout the city of New York, and other amenities for Bronxites. I think that one of the things that we need to start doing is thinking out the box, and we need to start exploring spaces that technically don't even exist. So we're going to come out with a report soon. We're going to look at the 3 different sites. We'll be looking and speaking to the community boards, the elected officials, and getting people's ideas to see which one is more feasible. Send it to the mayor's office and say, look, if they don't want it in Queens, why not take a look at the Bronx? So we don't know which way we will go, but it's worth trying.
I was only smiling when you said that because you said we're going to get input from everybody, and that goes back to our previous conversation.
You don't think I'm doing enough of that?
Just keeping you on your toes as best I can. Your friend...
but let me just say this, that sometimes, or the naysayers or the people who push back, getting input doesn't always necessarily mean that we always agree. But we do get information and input from the community all of the time.
Your friend Carl Hastie is now the Speaker of the Assembly. What is the Bronx going to see that it hasn't gotten from Shelley Silver, and what do you expect from him? I mean, he certainly has also been a very willing guest on our program, and he told me just the other day he's going to come back. But we've always talked about politics because that was his role here in the Bronx. So in a way, it's a little mystery of what his issues are. What do you expect out of Carl Hastie?
Well, I expect fairness, not only for the Bronx, Gary, but for the entire state of New York. So he's got to now, as the leader of the Assembly, he's got to go out there and negotiate the budget with the Senate leadership, with the governor of the state of New York, and really look at the whole state. What I do expect is to have a speaker now who understands the borough. We've never really had, well, certainly not as speaker of the New York State Assembly, but we've never had someone ascend to these heights in state government, in city government from the Bronx that understands the borough of the Bronx, understands our needs, and that when they are negotiating is just going to give us a fair shake. We don't want any preferential treatment. We just want...
Sure you do.
Well, no, but not necessarily. We understand the magnitude of his responsibilities. But what we're saying is if you just give us a fair shake, a fair look, certainly we'll get way much more than what we've been getting. The problem is whether you've had Democrats or Republicans, governors, leaders of the Assembly or the Senate in the city of New York, the Bronx, for many, many decades, just haven't had its fair share. And once you get that, you'll see us continue to progress.
Do you have an issue, or I mean, he's already talked about affordable housing and rent stabilization. We know that's already on the plate. Do you have an issue that the first moment you get, you're going to be able to say, hey, my friend
There
Carl,
are many issues, of course. I mean, look, you're talking
what's
about
at the top of your list?
Well, you talk about job creation, right? And you say, well, retail. But the state of New York, and I'm glad that they just announced the RFP to the Simone developers, the development. We're going to get a medical incubator there. We're going to get labs. This is going to be sort of the science and technical jobs that we've been looking for. Certainly, we would hope for more of investment in our educational system. I called for specialized high schools, and one in each borough. We certainly would need more of that gifted and talented programs in the Bronx. The list goes on capital financing and capital budgeting. So there are so many things that we will present to Speaker Hastie and the state, as well as the city and the federal government, financing for the Sheridan-Bruckner interchange to the Cross Bronx Expressway. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. What we're saying is just take a good look at this, give us a fair shake. We don't know if we can get it all done. In an ideal world, hopefully we could. But certainly we now have someone there who understands us.
I'm sure you are pleased about the access. I mean, you'll be able to pick up the phone and call somebody who you know very, very well. We're almost out of time.
Well, the access was always there. The thing is whether they understand and are willing to give us the fair share.
Without having to spend a couple hours on the phone to explain
right.
it. You talked about something called impact investing.
Right.
I thought it was an interesting concept. I've certainly studied a little bit, but I'll give you a chance to just explain how that would work to the benefit of the people of the Bronx.
So this is something that's been happening in other parts of the country, where you look at a certain development and you, because of social and environmental issues, you make an investment, especially with public dollars, mixed with private dollars as well, and because certainly there's a financial return with it. But you have to be smarter about what we do. We have to be smart about what we do with capital financing, especially when you're talking about housing and housing issues. Usually, as a borough president or city council member, we allocate capital funding to new housing. What we're saying is that there's an existing housing stock that we need to retrofit, that we need to make cleaner and more environmentally friendly. We believe we can create jobs for individuals. We believe that we can clean up the environment. We could give the property owner an investment. And if we reduce the cost of energies through boilers, through solar panels, wind turbines.
Certainly, we're almost out of time.
Hopefully, we can stabilize the rents and keep New York City affordable. So what I'm saying is that we need to create a revolving fund through this impact investing, and I think that it was worth giving it a try.
We're going to put up the replays on BronxNet television of when the State of the Borough, so people who didn't see it can see it. Also, certainly they can read the text on your website. We expect the next time you appear here will be your silver anniversary, 25th appearance. Maybe we'll get you a silver plate or something. But we appreciate your time and good luck the rest of the way.
I want to thank you, and I want to thank BronxNet for airing the State of the Borough address and everything that you guys do on a daily basis.
Thank you, Mr. Borough President. Folks, if you have further comments or questions on anything you heard on the show, as I said, you send them to us. We will get you an answer from the Borough President's office. You email them to us at bronxtalk@bronxnet.org. You put them on our Facebook page, and we'll read them on the air or forward them as necessary. Please like Bronx Talk on our Facebook page. You can also check out the archives at bronxnet.org. You find Bronx Talk on the lower right navigation bar. Thanks to our producer, who is Dahlia. Our director today was Bianca. The cast of thousands around us. We'll see you next week. Good night.
People think I'm trash, but they're wrong. Today I'm just an aluminum can, but one day I could be a stadium.
Body language can tell you all sorts of things. Like someone is having a stroke. Know the sudden signs. Learn fast. Face drooping, arm weakness, speech difficulty. Time to call 911 and get them to a hospital immediately. Learn the body language and spot a stroke fast.
If you drive buzzed, it could cost you around $10,000. You'll face major legal fees, major fines, and steep insurance penalties. You could lose everything. Buzzed, busted, and broke. Because buzz driving is drunk driving.
Live with a human for a while and you get to know a few things. Like, I know she does strange tricks for no treats. But the one thing I will never for the